HR professionals spend a lot of time managing the emotions of others. We deliver bad news, we mediate conflict, we field emotionally charged complaints from all sides. This is work. It's labor. And a discussion of how we can better manage it is coming up now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub, and on the show we talk about all kinds of things related to HR. I encourage you to please subscribe to the show or to the podcast to keep learning from my fantastic guests. Today, my guest is again Dina Denham Smith. Dina is an executive coach who has worked with senior leaders from organizations like Adobe, Netflix, Google. She's written so many HBR, Harvard Business Review articles, and she is the lead author of a book called Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work. Hello, Dina.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming back on. Today, we're going to talk about emotional labor. Yes. We don't give it the credit it deserves, so I'm glad to be...
100%.
So I'm glad to be talking about it. Okay, so what is emotional labor, and where did this come from? I mean, it's always been there, but we're starting to acknowledge it now, and how did that happen?
Yeah. So understanding emotional labor starts with understanding that all workplaces have unwritten rules for what emotions are okay to show, in what doses, and by whom. Emotional labor is the work that we do, consciously and unconsciously, to display those right feelings for specific situations at work. And sometimes it means that we evoke emotions that we don't feel. And sometimes it means we suppress the things that we actually do feel. So the way this shows up for leaders and organizations, I'll just give you a few examples.
Oh, sure.
It might look like rallying your team, even when you're uncertain about the goal or the direction that your organization is heading in. It looks like toggling between stakeholder groups and altering how you show up in order to be optimally effective, right? You need to show up a little bit different with your team than you do with your boss, than you do with the board. It looks like soothing tensions between team members. It looks like the emotional gymnastics that we're now asking of leaders. We ask them to be both confident yet humble. We ask them to be, authentic, but not too authentic. Be compassionate, but drive results. Like we're asking some, I just consider it emotional gymnastics to displaying in the right doses. And it also looks like making and implementing decisions that impact real people's lives. So from restructuring a changed, fatigued department to letting an underperformer go to conducting a layoff, all of these require emotional labor. The problem is that this emotional labor that leaders do, that is just absolutely fundamental to their role, has been unacknowledged and unmanaged and unsupported for years and years and years. And when we do a lot of emotional labor and we don't have it goes unacknowledged, and therefore we don't necessarily have all the strategies for handling it, it can result in some real costs for individuals and teams and organizations.
Yeah, I can just see how it's so important to do that well, and how important that is to our success, and especially like leaders and HR.
Yeah.
Like we're doing that kind of thing all the time. A lot of people dismiss the concept, though, of emotional labor. They think it's like made up, or it's a fancy name for stress. Is it?
That's really funny.
Okay,
No.
actually, maybe that's not your experience. Maybe people don't dismiss it.
Generally speaking, certainly the leaders that I've talked to about this, and I've talked to hundreds at this point, they're like, oh my gosh, that's what this is. Like
Yeah.
they finally have a name for this drain that they've been feeling that they did not have a term for before. In fact, I think that's the reason why I wrote an article, gosh, it was probably maybe a year or two into the pandemic for HBR, and it was called The Emotional Labor of Leadership. And it's been one of my most successful articles ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because people like leaders were like, oh my God, that's this thing. Like
Yeah.
it has historically just not been acknowledged. We all know what physical labor is. We talk about cognitive labor, like, oh, I'm just so exhausted. I've had my head in this spreadsheet for, 8 hours or whatever it is. But the emotional labor, which is such a huge part of what leaders do and what HR professionals do has not been discussed. Like, show me one job description that lists it as a critical capacity. Um,
None. I can attest. I have never seen it in a job description.
yeah,
Never.
yeah, and it's absolutely it's just so a part of the role. And so no, it's not made up. I think there have been people who are unaware of it. Um, but but when they understand what it really is, they can see it in their own lives,
Yes.
and in organizations.
Yes.
Um, and so I think it's not equivalent. It's a form of job stress. You know,
Hmm.
stress can look like a lot of things in
Hmm.
organizations. It's a specific kind of job stress that, again, has historically gone overlooked. Yes.
So when we're engaged in emotional labor, where it's not like we're burning calories, why does it feel so exhausting?
The reason emotional labor is exhausting is because um, oftentimes when people are performing it, like I mentioned at the beginning, they're evoking emotions they didn't feel, right? Like they're showing up
Yeah,
peppy
yeah.
to that team meeting, even though they're feeling exhausted and uncertain about the goal. Um, or they're suppressing things that they really feel. So when we have feelings and we either suppress what we really feel to show up kind of with our game face or to put on a
Hmm.
mask, or when we evoke things that we don't really feel, it is a little bit like trying to push a beach ball underwater, right? You're like, what are you talking about?
Oh,
Uh,
I know what you're talking about. That is how it feels.
yes, right? If you've ever tried to push a beach ball underwater, you know you can do it, but it takes effort.
Yes.
It's exactly the same with emotions. The problem is, if you have just one beach ball, fine, you can kind of keep it under there for a while. But life and work don't work like that, right? Inevitably, we are faced with another situation that taxes us emotionally. And we try to shove that beach ball under the surface too. And now there we are. We're trying to manage all of these beach balls under the
Yeah.
surface. And what inevitably happens, right, is they start to pop out. And
They do. And they
oftentimes
explode out.
they explode out.
That's such a
Exactly.
good analogy.
Exactly. And oftentimes they hit innocent bystanders right in the face. This has happened to me, and I think it's happened to everybody. You have a hard day at work and you've held it together, and you come home and you're with the people who love you and accept you the most. And what do? You snap at them, right? It's
Yeah.
finally
Yeah.
like a beach ball is like pling.
Yeah.
And so trying, when we are submerging our emotions, it's like pushing a beach ball underwater. And that all sounds really silly. Um, but the reason this is true is because emotions actually have three parts. We talk about emotions and feelings as though
Mhm.
they are interchangeable. But
Mhm.
emotions have one, this behavioral layer. This is what other people might see on the surface. So when we're down in a meeting, but we smile, or our
Mhm.
or our boss makes a joke and we don't think it's funny at all, but we laugh because it's in our best interest. This is where managing the behavioral element of an emotion. But
Mm-hmm.
beneath it all, there's a physiological component. Like, think
Mm-hmm.
about the last time you were put on the spot in a high stakes meeting, right? And you feel all of these physiological sensations. Maybe it's butterflies, maybe your hands get clammy, maybe you feel a flush of heat on your face. This is like the physiology of stress showing up in your body. So there's
Mm-hmm.
the second component. And then there's a third component to emotions, which is your mental interpretation of your internal sensations and the context that you're in. And it's what you tell yourself. So, oh, I'm so mad, right? We've applied a label to the experience.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing that's most akin to emotions. And so at work, when we are suppressing and evoking emotions, we're just managing that behavioral piece. But there's all of this physiology and cognitive construction of emotions too, and that has not been dealt with, right? And it's just still there, and
Mm-hmm.
that is why there can ultimately, over time, be costs to too much unacknowledged or unmanaged emotional labor in organizations.
You mentioned the cost in our last discussion, and I just didn't stop you to ask because I had so many questions. What is the cost to unacknowledged emotions that are like underneath the surface?
Yeah. When we fake and suppress our emotions over time, um, there are costs to our performance and relationships. Leaders
Mm,
have a harder time building trust.
mm,
They engage in more abusive leadership behaviors. And by that, I mean making belittling comments,
mm,
being overly critical.
mhm.
Um, it spills over into our family lives. People who are faking and suppressing their emotions a lot at work experience more conflict at home
Mm.
because there's an exhaustion, because we're pushing those beach balls underwater. They come home more fatigued, of course, right? And so it also shows up in more compulsive eating, drinking more,
Oh, yeah,
more
like
phys-
so many places.
so many things, more physical pain, more anxiety, more depression, and to an extreme, cardiovascular issues
Mhm.
because of the stress.
Yeah,
And so there's some very significant costs individually and then collectively
yeah.
when there is too much faking and suppressing of emotions occurring in organizations.
Sometimes it's the right thing to do, though. Sometimes it is the right thing to just suppress it for the time being and go
Yeah.
somewhere else, maybe with a professional to process the emotion.
Yes.
Mm.
That's what gets tricky, right? Because it's not
Yes.
about letting it all hang out. We need to manage our emotions um, in order to be effective in relationships and be effective at work. There's no doubt about it. Um, that needs to happen. We just can't suppress or ignore or fake too much over time without doing some of the work to process what is real.
Ah, yes. Thinking about HR and yeah, I know that the most of the work you do is for leaders, and a lot of HR are leaders, either formally or informally. But I can't, as I think I said in the intro, think of a part of the organization that does more emotional labor as a standard, except
Hmm.
me leaders. So when we think about emotional labor, what does it look like? What does it feel like for HR?
Um, Interestingly, we did a survey for the book and we asked leaders, like, what are the most emotionally demanding situations that you need to contend with at work? Like, what are the hardest things that you
Mhm,
encounter sort of within the emotional landscape?
mhm.
Um, and they came up with a top 5 list for us.
Oh, yeah.
And the top 2 were personnel issues, like dealing with conflict, underperformance. That was tied with organizational change, um,
Mm,
followed by handling personal issues for team members, like whether it's family situations or some of mental challenges,
Mm-hmm.
mental health challenges that they might be dealing with. Work design changes was in the top 5 list, as well as spillover from sort of mega societal events.
Yeah.
Um, and as I think about HR, like, you
That's
know,
us. Check, 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 check.
check, right? This is when HR is brought in. And so HR is oftentimes brought into what are considered the most emotionally demanding situations that leaders need to deal with. Um, and thankfully, leaders can rely on HR to come in and help with these situations. But there's a significant load from managing that much emotion.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I would add is that there's a phrase used in more of like the scientific literature, and it's toxin handler. Um, and
Oh,
toxin handlers are the people in organizations who voluntarily bear the weight of the pain and the negative emotions in organizations and look to alleviate those. Things like bitterness and frustration and anger, and sadness. All of these, all this pain and negative emotion, it exists in organizations. And toxin handlers understand, like, first, they care about people and they understand that people can't do their best work when they're in these distressed states. And so they step in to alleviate and buffer this emotion. And it's so fundamental to organizational effectiveness.
mm,
And HR leaders, oftentimes by their very nature, are, are toxin handlers by their nature and by their role. Like, they care, they understand, they appreciate. Um, and so oftentimes some of the HR leaders that I've spoken with or worked with, it just feels undervalued. Their impact on effectiveness is a little bit unseen. Um, and this can be exhausting, right? It can lead
yeah.
to compassion, fatigue, burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I don't even remember your original question.
I don't
But
either, but you know what? You know what? When you were talking about that, I could almost get a little bit emotional here because I
Mm,
was feeling seen. I am. Stop. Isn't that funny? That is so funny.
yeah,
Like that, that, that you've
toxin
you've
handlers
hit
go
something.
unseen, and
You have hit on something there
yeah,
for
it's
sure
part of
when
the
it comes to HR.
exhaustion. It's part of the exhaustion. So
Yeah. And I feel like, this is actually a strength of mine of being
mhm,
able to be the toxin handler and, you know, kind of help people work through that stuff and
yeah,
move on and make good business decisions. Um, but I've never seen it acknowledged everywhere, anywhere. So thank you for that. Um, that's being a toxin handler is emotional labor for sure.
mhm.
Um, Doing that over and over, how is it going to impact our ability to cope and impact us professionally?
Um, that's where having strategies for kind of releasing and processing all of that emotion
Yeah.
are so fundamental.
Mhm.
Um, there are 3 things that are really proven to help leaders cope with and recover from the emotional drain. And the first is reflect. So we talked
Mhm.
a little bit about this, but we need to metabolize all the emotion that we feel in order
Mhm.
for it to not sort of build up and have unintended health, performance, and relationship consequences. And we can't always do that in the moment. You know, organizations are moving too quickly, and we can't in a meeting always be like, "I just need to take a moment to process
No.
how I'm feeling about this," right? Like, we can't. Let's be real.
Mhm.
Um, but not doing it at all is can have negative effects. So
Yeah.
taking time to reflect on our feelings, whether it is through journaling or just introspection or talking with a trusted, um, friend, coach, therapist, partner, whoever,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
helpful. The
Yeah.
second is reframing. And and by that I'm not just talking about like putting on rose-colored glasses and trying to
No.
see the silver lining in a situation. What I am talking about more is is reframing how we see ourselves amidst
Mhm.
the difficulty that we can face in the workplace, and having
Mhm.
self-compassion
Mhm.
for our mistakes, our missteps, our um, the things that we find ourselves ruminating about, is
Mhm.
treating ourselves with the same kindness that we would treat another person who described that exact situation to us.
Mhm.
This again
Mhm.
unleashes inordinate benefits, both personally as well as to a leader's team. And then
Mhm.
last but not least, there is when we endure stress for a sustained period of time, there's a real physiological need to recuperate from that. But too often, we get stuck in the stress spiral and we just go,
Mhm.
go, 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 and don't take some time to restore. And we don't need necessarily a lot of time. We don't need to take a sabbatical always, but having, daily, weekly moments where we truly detach from work, we choose what we want to do, whether it's engaging in something very relaxing or or even a mastery experience, like cooking something fun at the end of the day,
Mhm.
or taking 15 minutes to play your guitar or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Um, all of these methods, the reflecting, the reframing, the restoring are critical to handling the emotional drain. And there are more strategies that I would
Yeah.
offer as well. But I'll stop right there because I know I've gone on for a bit.
No, I mean, that's great. Should we be trying to minimize emotional labor?
Oftentimes, emotional labor is this very pro-social, beautiful, humanizing element to the
Mm.
workplace.
Mhm.
So when a leader is feeling burned out and their team member comes to them to talk about, like, I'm feeling really burnt out, like, you know, can we brainstorm some ways for me to just build in a little more time or take a personal day later this week? And the leader actually shows up with compassion for that person's situation, despite having that same situation themselves. That's emotional labor.
For
And
sure it is.
right? Should we not do that? I don't think so. Right?
No.
It is fundamental to effective supportive leadership and team cohesion and team performance and retention should
Can
get
I
this.
interrupt you there, though?
Yeah.
That person is showing up, that burnt out leader or burnt out HR person showing up, and doing the emotional labor with a person who's coming into their office who's also burning out. Um, should we not, out of a sense of self-preservation, hold back a little bit there?
And what do you mean by hold back?
Well, not engage in a super deep emotional way because it's gonna burn us out even further.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you just asked this question because it gives me this chance to talk about different forms of empathy, which is a really essential way that people like HR, when they are consistently handling other people's negative emotions, it's a very protective strategy. So there's different kinds of empathy.
Mhm.
There's emotional empathy where we really feel what somebody
Yeah,
else is feeling.
yeah, yeah.
There's cognitive empathy where we don't take it on in a physical way, but
Mhm,
we engage in a more intellectual way to
mhm,
understand what's going on with this person. What is leading to this situation for them, right? We
mhm.
almost hold as opposed to like it being like a sponge where we absorb it. We hold the person in the situation almost like more in our hand as an object to
Mhm.
to understand and appreciate. And then there's called compassionate empathy or empathic concern, which is showing people compassion for the situation that they're dealing with. For that burned out leader or for that HR leader who is just handling so much, engaging with the situation with more cognitive empathy than
Mm-hmm.
emotional empathy is a
Mm-hmm.
profoundly protective strategy. Unchecked emotional empathy, right, is what can lead to compassion fatigue and burnout. For HR folks and leaders who are dealing with a bunch of heavy situations on their teams, you can't be in it with everybody. Or there's a lot of collateral damage that that ultimately, can harm you and then, harm your team downstream.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're getting close to the end of this. If someone is listening to this feeling overwhelmed or depleted by the amount of emotional labor they're doing, what do you suggest?
Yeah, I would go back to those 3 R's:
Yeah.
reflecting, reframing, showing yourself self-compassion, and ensuring you are taking time to recover your energetic resources,
Mm-hmm.
in a consistent, regular way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would offer up that, um, savoring, like, the beneficial impact that you're having on others,
Mm.
it's buffering.
Yeah.
So really appreciating that, like, your effort's not for naught, right? Like,
Mm.
you're unleashing a lot of, benefit and alleviating a lot of pain
Mm-hmm.
and actually help reduce, some of the drain on you.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask yourself, are you engaging with emotional empathy or cognitive empathy?
Mm-hmm.
I would think about boundaries.
Mm.
Uh,
Yes.
I think there's a lot of useful, um, things to think about and that you probably have some opportunities. Um, but amidst all of this, um, hold yourself with self-compassion um, for the efforts that you're making
Mm-hmm.
and the toll that it maybe has taken, um, so
Mm-hmm.
far. And this will be not only good for you, um, but when we show ourselves self-compassion more, we're more able to show it to other people. And so there are trickle down effects, to personal and professional relationships and teams. So it's actually a performance practice. It's not a soft practice.
Amazing. Okay. Where can someone find you and just learn more generally about the topic of emotional labor?
The best place to find me is my website, Dina D. Smith. You can contact me through that or on LinkedIn. Again, my name's Dina Denham Smith. I think there's only one of me in the world. And then you can learn a whole lot more about emotional labor and the science of emotions and effective strategies for managing not just your own emotions, but other emotions, other people's emotions in the workplace. Um, in our book, Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work. And you'll find me all over HBR as well.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tina. That was uh, actually touching. I am surprised. After so many episodes, I have not been affected that way. I'm especially just that feeling seen by that idea of toxin handler and how powerful a role that is in organizations for creating more organizational effectiveness. So if you're doing that out there, good job. Keep it up. Dina and I alluded to another discussion we've had or referred to it, and we discussed emotional savvy. A link to that is at the side of the screen, or you can find that, in the list of episodes. Thanks for watching out there, and we'll see you next time.